What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. Welcome to our daily show where we discuss everything going on here in our country that you need to know about on a daily basis, including money, investing, the stock market, the fourth stimulus package update, and stimulus check update. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, make sure to click the subscribe button down below. I will keep you up to date here with everything going on here in our country on a daily basis. And right now, we have over a dozen different states that are sending out a fourth stimulus check and proposing stimulus checks here because states and the federal government are taking in more revenue than ever. And the possibility of recurring checks, stimulus checks, tax rebate checks are becoming more and more likely. Let me show you a statistic here. And I'll show you an interview here about how these programs, if you've been watching my channel here, we have had universal basic income programs and guaranteed basic income programs all across the United States that in smaller numbers have been very successful on sending out monthly stimulus checks or monthly universal basic income programs, monthly guaranteed income checks already. This has already happened for thousands and thousands of people across America. And now that tax revenues are up, this type of stuff is even more possible. Let me show you a statistic here. Yeah, you can see here literally from today, from Yahoo Finance here, everybody wants credit for the booming tax revenue that is coming in here from the federal government and from the state governments. Of course, every state governor is going to say that it was their fiscal genius and their master budgetary, but realistically this is just kind of part of the inflationary curve. This is part of why or the recessionary curve, we can almost say it's the same thing, right? This is part of why inflation is so hot. Remember that when the recession was, when the country shut down, that was, an anomaly. We've never really seen the country shut down before. But inflation was near zero. Sometimes when we have a recession, inflation actually goes negative. Okay. And then when you come out of the recession, we're talking about multiple different recessions. You look back in history, and when the recession is at its height, inflation's really, really low. And when you come out of the recession, inflation picks back up. Things pick back up and inflation picks back up. Okay. It's kind of making up for the 0% inflation or even sometimes negative inflation that happens during that period. Okay. And what also happens is when people go back to work, income picks back up for people and for states, and in this case, the federal government as well. Check this out. Everybody wants credit for the booming tax revenue that's going on. And again, you really can't give Biden credit for this. You really can't give all the governors credit for this. Just like you really can't blame Biden for all the inflation. I mean, if Trump was there, if you look at all the other countries, this inflation's going on in all the other countries as well. As if you've been watching my channel, you know this. But you can see here, everything that's going wrong. Inflation is too high, crime is too widespread, Russia is a barbaric menace. But at least one thing is going right. Federal tax revenue is soaring, providing at least temporary respite to the usual fiscal gloom. Check this out. Total federal receipts for 2022 are up 39%. Total federal tax receipts are up 39% from the same period in 2021. So, yeah, they've taken in 39% more tax revenue this year. And honestly, if Trump was there in office, he'd be claiming that this was his doing. Biden's going to claim this was his doing, but realistically, this is all kind of part of the inflation and the recessionary curve. Revenue from individual income taxes, the biggest source, is up 69%. 69%. That is unbelievable. That's just mind blowing. Wow. Revenue from business taxes is up 22%. This is because a lot of businesses are struggling, especially small businesses. But still, 22% is nothing to sneeze at. But this is just mind blowing. So individual income taxes are up 69% in tax revenue. Total tax revenue this year could amount to 19.6% of GDP, which would be the most since the dot-com mania in 2000, which swelled government coffers. Politicians accustomed to blaming each other, does that sound familiar? For myriad problems, also impulsively take credit when something good happens. President Biden says my economic policies powered a rapid recovery. If Trump was president, he would say the same thing, and he would say that inflation wasn't his fault either. I mean, let's be realistic here, right? That boosted tax revenue, that led to a huge decline in this year's federal deficit. So there's more money coming in than ever. Well, not than ever, but in 20 some years, and it could even become even more because remember 2022 is just getting started here, and you see how much the revenues are up. So they're going to have money for programs for whatever they want to spend on. Whatever they want to spend on. President Biden said they're going to have $1.5 trillion to pay down the deficit. And that's just kind of the start of it. That's not all the money they're going to have. They're going to have money. President Biden says they're going to have a new SNAP conference to raise food stamp benefits. All these states are basically flush with cash as well and giving money back to their residents to state stimulus check programs, tax rebate programs, property tax rebate programs, lowering taxes for their residents. Each state's doing a little bit differently. If you've been watching my channel, I'm keeping you up to date with that. But it's actually a good time for stimulus checks on the federal level as well because they have the money to do it. It's not like really all three of the last stimulus checks, which basically just went to the national deficit. Okay. Now they're running a surplus. So it's kind of like a business that used to be running negative, used to be losing money. Now the business is making trillions of dollars. It's interesting how that can happen with the flick of a switch, but this is the economy, right? And we're talking about 330 million people. And honestly, I hate to say this, but this is part of the reason why inflation is running hot. The economy is just running red hot. Everybody's back to work, things are running high, and it's kind of making up for the really low inflation we had. I mean, when the country shut down, demand for everything went down, nobody was driving, gas plummeted. You kind of get the picture here. But check out this interview here on monthly stimulus checks and how they could provide $1,000, $2,000 per month of stimulus checks, how they have done so in the past for multiple different regions, cities, groups of people, and they have the money to do this. And when you look at this petition here that has been signed on change.org for over 3 million Americans for $2,000 per month to every American. This has been signed by over 3 million Americans. It's one of the highest signatures petitions ever in the world. It's the highest I've ever seen. I mean, imagine getting 3 million people to sign a petition. It's unbelievable. And this stems from Vice President Kamala Harris, who came up with this idea. Here is her actual tweet. You can Google this and see this for yourself. Here it is right here on the screen. It says, I'm proposing $2,000 monthly payments throughout the end of the pandemic and for 3 months after. because rent and bills are still due during this crisis or crises, however you want to say it, and people are going hungry. It's that basic. Yeah. This comes directly from Kamala Harris, who used to be Senator Kamala Harris and is now Vice President Kamala Harris. Yeah, so let me know your thoughts and then listen to this interview. Very interesting.
Americans are starting the summer worried about money, with almost 70% saying that the state of the US economy is bad. President Biden addressed some concerns in a new Wall Street Journal op-ed this week titled, "My Plan for Fighting Inflation." Biden writes the job market is the strongest since the post-World War II era, with over 8 million new jobs, the fastest decline in unemployment on record, and millions of Americans getting jobs with better pay. And business investment, he says, is up 20%, and manufacturing jobs are growing at their fastest rate in 30 years. But it'll take more than op-eds to make Americans more confident about the economy. One thing Biden isn't talking about much right now, the direct payments that his administration made to Americans just last year, which is kind of surprising given how popular and effective they were. Nearly 4 in 5 voters supported the Biden administration's $1,400 payments last year. When you add up all the payments from the pandemic relief, most adult Americans got around $3,000. And starting in July of last year, the child tax credit sent a minimum of $250 to families every month. According to research from Columbia University, this resulted in the lowest poverty rate on record. Both child poverty and poverty among black people decreased by nearly half. And remember, that's during a pandemic that decimated the economy just a year before. So if these cash infusions work to reduce poverty in 2021, wouldn't more payments help reduce poverty this year too and every year? That's the idea behind a universal basic income. Give Americans direct cash payments. Some advocates say give it to everyone, regardless of income. Cities like Stockton, California have piloted basic income programs, sending qualified residents payments every month. How far can these programs be expanded? And are they really the key to alleviating poverty in America, or too utopian and too expensive an idea? My next guests have spent years making the case for a basic income, for a universal basic income in some cases, or UBI. Michael Tubbs is the former Democratic mayor of Stockton, California, who spearheaded a program to send payments to low-income residents. And Otis Rowley is Senior Vice President for U.S. Equity and Economic Opportunity at the Rockefeller Foundation. Thank you both for joining me. Michael, let me start with you. You spearheaded the Basic Income Project in Stockton. What was the outcome there? What happened? And who got the money? Not everyone, right?
Yeah, well, because we're doing a pilot, we weren't able to get to everyone, but we made sure that we had a representative sample that looked like the community. And what we saw was that the people spent money the way you and I and the viewers spent money on their kids, on maintenance, on car insurance, on groceries. We also saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to go from part-time to full-time work than those who didn't, and 2 times less likely to be unemployed. We also saw significant mental health impacts comparable to clinical trials of Prozac. So it's really interesting that, especially given the stat you raised, that in 2021, we had the lowest poverty rate on record during a pandemic, because we gave people a little bit of an income floor, that we're still having this conversation. We know what the data shows, yes, that people need cash to get to work. People need cash for all types of health outcomes. And now it's just continuing to build the political will to do that.
Otis, critics, of course, say that if you send people free money, they won't want to work. What is your response to that common criticism of basic income programs?
Well, first and foremost, I was going to say, the Rockefeller Foundation is a private foundation. We are nonpartisan, and we are led by data and science. And I really appreciate that you led the conversation today with the data that show that Biden's plan is the funds that came into Americans' pocketbooks and wallets. It was actually spent in a way that secured economic security, right? It really created opportunity for folks to have the wiggle room. The U.S. Equity and Economic Opportunity Initiative that I lead at the foundation is focused in on low-wage workers and how do we really kind of create more economic security and mobility. And we know that the data tells us, thanks to pilots or Mayor Tubbs and others, the data shows us, right, that if folks have more cash, surprise, surprise, they're making the right decisions. We don't have to be paternalistic in terms of how the money should be spent, because folks have the financial wherewithal, once they have those dollars, to make the right decisions for them and for their families. So we saw that with the stimulus funds. We see that with the guaranteed income. And so I try to just dispel the misinformation with facts. And the data shows us the facts are solid and clear, that if we infuse this capital into the pocketbooks and wallets of Americans, that they are going to make the right decision, and it actually creates more economic security and wiggle room for economic mobility.
Michael, it's a bold idea, and we have a Democratic Party that's not known for pushing bold ideas. Sorry to be blunt about your political party. What do you make of the Biden administration's handling of the economy right now, broadly, not just basic income, not just checks, but the kind of bold ideas that are going to lift people out of poverty, that are going to transform people's lives, and are going to get people to the polls?
Yeah, no, I think we have to remember the context in which they came in. That much of the things we're seeing now in the economy, particularly as it pertains to inflation and shipping issues, are because of the tariffs of the last administration. And that, I think, given that context, given the pandemic, no one's perfect, but the Biden administration has tried and has done a lot to increase infrastructure spending, but also the child tax credit. It wasn't that the president didn't want to get it done. The president literally went on TV and said, "This is my top priority." The issue is that there's a senator in West Virginia who fell prey to the tropes and the stereotypes that so many people do about why people are poor and why people spend money. So, of course, there's room for improvement, but I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the president on most things have been very forthright about what he wants to see. And it's really about getting Congress and the Senate, and particularly one senator from West Virginia or a whole other 40-plus senators that are Republican, to also get on board with an agenda that's good for all Americans, because not just Democrats who need money. The majority of Americans don't have enough money for one emergency, and that should be something that gets bipartisan support.
We are very familiar with the blocking tactics of the senator from West Virginia on this show. Otis, let me ask you this. Joe Biden was bragging about deficit reduction recently as one of his big, economic victories, which personally I think is a mistake. It's a Republican talking point. You're from a think tank that's not Republican or Democrats. Let me just ask you the practical question that's associated with a lot of this rhetoric. When people are talking about balancing the budget and deficit reduction, and someone like yourself or Michael comes along and says, give people money directly, basic income, the comeback in D.C. in particular is, how are we going to pay for it?
We will pay for it in the way that we have always paid for it, in terms of our tax revenues are our dollars that are coming back to us to help to ensure that we are competitive and secure. And I do feel, I know a lot of this conversation today is about Biden and at the national level, but I do feel like all politics are local, right? And the leadership that Mayor Tubbs showed, the leadership that we often see is often at the local level, and it builds itself up. We are investing in 12 places through our Rockefeller Opportunity Collective with mayors and county execs who, like Mayor Tubbs, are at the vanguard. They're the tip of the spear in terms of looking for innovation. They are bipartisan. We have Republican and Democratic mayors and county execs who are leaders and recognize that if we're going to do something, it has to be now. Right, and that our dollars are best spent on us in a way that really creates real security and mobility. And I know that when you think about those populations that have been hardest hit, not just through COVID, but historically, they are Black, they are Latinx, they are Indigenous folks, and we saw in those stats that you talked about at the very beginning of the show that those populations were positively affected by the stimulus dollars. And we know through the work of Mayor Tubbs and others in other cities, we're seeing that 7 of our 12 cities, we have mayors that are doing this guaranteed income, not because they think it's a good idea, but because the data shows that it's a good idea, and they want to do what's in the best interest of their population. And I pray and hope that the state and national level, they will follow the leadership that these mayors are stepping up and moving forward in terms of putting their people first.
Yeah, so let me know your thoughts here. The one guy's from the Rockefeller Foundation, and the other guy is from the actual Universal Basic Income Program from Oakland. I think it was that sent out monthly income or monthly stimulus checks, Universal Basic Income checks. Pretty much the same thing, whatever you want to call them, different names. same result. And remember, there's been programs like this all around the country that have happened. There was one in Chicago, one in LA. I mean, all over. And the reality of it is that now the states and the federal government are all having billions and trillions of dollars of extra money coming in. They have revenue to fund programs like this, extra money for SNAP benefits, extra money for Social Security, extra money for child tax credits. I mean, if you think about it, the child tax credits with those monthly checks is or was exactly that, monthly checks to support people, to support children, to support their families, to support mothers, to support this exact thing. So if you think that this type of stuff can't happen, it literally happened last year, $3,000 to $3,600 per child. So yeah, I mean, right now it's kind of stalled whether they're going to put it in the next reconciliation package, whether Republicans are going to step up to the plate and help out passing it, whether Joe Manchin's going to help out. There's a lot to be determined here. Whether it's going to happen before the midterm elections, after the midterm elections, yeah, there's a lot up in the air. But one thing is for certain is that states and the federal government are taking in more money than they have this entire century. This goes all the way back to basically 2000 or, back to the dot-com uh, bubble or dot-com era when the tech companies were bringing in tons of money. So let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I'll keep you up to date here. And, if anything, it's better for the federal government and state governments to be bringing in a lot of money and have money to fund programs than to not have money and say, well, we don't have the money, we're running a deficit. So when they have money, they can actually spend money on whatever they want. So make sure to subscribe down below to our YouTube channel. It's completely free to do so you don't miss out on new videos. After you click the subscribe button, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you get notifications as soon as we go live with new videos so you don't miss out. New videos come out here every day, 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can click here to see my new video I just did on Social Security raises. And here's another video I just did on stimulus checks coming out here soon. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.